What is up, everybody? Ethan Newberry, the Ginger Runner, here for another Ginger Runner Live, episode number 32. We're deep into the Ginger Runner Live episodes. I think I say that every week, but tonight we're really deep. And we're going to be getting deep with my... This is disgusting. What a terrible way to start. We're going to be talking with a good friend of mine and an all-around amazing ultra runner. He's done a lot this year. We had him on the show very briefly a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months actually. But I'm really excited to kind of get in depth and talk to him about some of his huge accomplishments that have occurred this year. He's already flashed on screen. Here he is, Mr. Josh Spector. Welcome to the show, dude.
Thanks, Ethan. I'm honored to be back on it. I'm really psyched.
I've been wanting to get you on an episode since that episode that you were on because we so briefly got to talk to you about the Brazil 135. Tonight, I can't wait to talk to you more about the Badwater 135. You've run 235-mile races in 1 year, which is nuts, plus many more. And we'll talk a lot about them on tonight's show. Those of you who are watching live, welcome. Those of you who are listening in the podcast, welcome after the fact, but still welcome. Let's get started. Ginger Runner Live, episode number 32. Ginger Runner. Boom! Yes, awesome! Woo! Yeah, I'm so glad Josh is celebrating too. I'm really excited for tonight's show. I know this guy pretty well. We've crewed together, we've done races together, we've trained together, but I've never really been able to sit down and talk to him, pick his brain a little bit about what he's been able to accomplish and how he's been able to do it. Anytime we go on a training run, I try to pick his brain as much as possible, just to learn and absorb like a young sponge. But we always end up talking about other things, or we end up just focusing on the run, and I never get a chance to like tell me how you do it. So tonight, I'm really excited. Josh, you're awesome. You're a really talented ultra runner. You even have a day job, so you're able to find that balance of like real life and running life. You do some pretty incredible things. You travel around the world. You run everywhere. We're going to talk to you about all of that on today's show. I hope that's cool with you.
Yeah, I'm psyched.
Okay, so we can get like super personal, super deep. We're gonna like talk about how you were born. That's terrible. That's disgusting.
How I was born?
Yeah, that's gonna be really.
I mean, we could. I'll see if I have any photos of that.
That's how I want to start the show.
Yeah.
let's just start at the beginning. Photos of Josh's birth.
Yes.
Let's focus on
Would
that.
Would C-section be worse or better? I don't know.
We'll let the audience determine that. Okay, so before we get into the actual talking about stuff, this is I want to go over some things that have been happening in the last week with Ginger Runner. For those of you who purchased a buff, the first round of buffs, they've all gone out. They have all been shipped. You should have gotten shipping notifications, and you should be able to track them. I've already been getting tons of rad photos of people sporting their Ginger Runner Train Race Beer buffs, which is exciting. I am so excited to be able to share these guys with everybody around the world, which is really cool. An update for those of you who have not been able to get a buff, because we sold out in under 4 minutes, which is crazy. I am making a new order, and I will be taking pre-orders for that whole new shipment, starting hopefully next week. It'll be a short window. It'll be about a 2 to 3 day window for pre-orders, just because pre-orders can't last too long, because then I can't order the gear and have it made. So it's going to be like a 3 or 4 day pre-order period. And I'll make sure that I blast out there every single day, get your pre-order on. There's not going to be a rush for them. Basically, anyone that wants to order one can order one, and they will be guaranteed one, so I can just basically make one mass order. I want to also, the reason why it's taken so long to do the pre-orders is because I'm redoing my website. I'm completely redoing it. It needs to be updated. I need to have an online store that works and is good and is safe, and I'm really excited. This website is taking forever, but it is something that needs to get done, and I'm very excited to share that with you. So hopefully within the next week I'll be able to unveil the new website, and that'll also be the same time that you can do pre-orders on buffs, which I'm excited about. And finally, I am running the New York Marathon starting... Well, it's in November, but I am raising money for UNICEF. I'm running it with Shay Carl and a bunch of his friends. I don't know if you are familiar with Shay Carl. He's a big YouTuber, really awesome, hilarious guy, and he will be running it with some of his friends, and he invited me to come along. A part of that is I got to raise money for charity. It's the first time I've ever done anything like this. I have lots of friends that have done it in the past, and the last thing I want to do is berate. Maybe that's the word I'm looking at. Barrage? Whatever the word is.
Barrage.
I don't want to keep barrage. I don't want to just keep throwing out, hey, donate, ho donate. So I'm going to just say it now, and I'll probably say it at the beginning of each Ginger Runner Live episode very briefly. If you would like to donate to my UNICEF charity where I can go to the New York Marathon, I'm trying to raise $3,500. We're not even close. You have to go to crowdwise.com, and then if you go to the Team UNICEF New York Marathon, search for Ethan Newberry, and it will pop up, and you can donate there. I'm at like $250 now. I've got a long ways to go, $3,250. So any little bit helps. So go check that out. That is it. And
is a link on your website? Is a link on? Have you tweeted the link? Is it on your website and stuff?
I've tweeted the link. It's on the Facebook. It's on the Twitter. It's everywhere. I could actually, I don't want, I'll do it at the end of the show as well, and I'll stick it in the description of this episode in case you just want to wait and click it there, because it's one of those very specific URLs with
right
and weird things. All right, let's get into the show. Tonight I will be drinking. This weekend I went to Stone Brewery for a wedding. My cousin's wedding was at Stone Brewery, which is kind of the best place to have a wedding, especially for me. And I brought back some specialty beer. This is Stone's Sublimely Self-Righteous Black IPA. It's supposed to be delicious, so I'll be drinking this. Josh, I'm assuming some water, healthy kombucha type beverage?
Something like that. I lost my drink. I had it when I set up, but it was
Milk?
Milk? I don't do no milk. No, it was the remainder of my veggie shake from this morning. That was still in the fridge.
See, that sounds good. That sounds refreshing and delicious.
This one was.
Yeah, and let me know, those of you who are watching, let me know in the comments and the chat room, which is on the YouTube channel. Let me know what you guys are drinking tonight. Josh, to you, my friend. Super stoked to have you on the show. Because you've done some pretty incredible things this year alone. Not only are you a seasoned ultra runner, you've done a number of 100-mile races, 50, 100Ks, all that good stuff. This year you did 2 135-mile races. Let's start with the Brazil 135. We talked to you briefly about it when you were on the episode before. What made you want to travel to Brazil and run 135 miles through some backcountry, for the most part, in a country that maybe you're not familiar with? Tell us a bit about how that happened.
Yeah, Badwater, Brazil, it was something of a, I don't know, leap of faith is the right word, but before this year I'd crewed at Badwater 3 or 4 times, and the Brazil 135 community and the Badwater 135 community sort of overlap. And the race director in Brazil, this really great guy, he says he was inspired by Badwater, and he generally organizes the Brazilians who come to Badwater, most of whom always traditionally kick ass there. And so I met him a couple times, and I'd met some of the guys I'd crewed with and just met around, had done Brazil, and kept talking about what an awesome experience it was. And so it was on my mind going into crewing there last year in 2013. I was considering it. I was thinking, I was thinking about doing it. And as it turned out, the guy that I was crewing for, Ray Sanchez, and the other 3 people on the crew that year, all 3 of them had done Brazil at least once. So once I raised it, they were like, they jumped all over it. They were talking about what a great experience it was. They introduced me to some of the other Brazilian people. They introduced me to the U.S. liaisons. So at that point, I felt like, I wanted to do it anyways, but I was in pretty deep, and so it was sort of hard at that point to there was almost no question that I was going to do it at that point. Peer pressure, maybe?
Yeah, maybe peer pressure. Was there anything that you had to do differently to prepare for this? Traveling to a foreign country is its own challenge. You had never been to Brazil before, I'm assuming,
Never,
unless you
never South
okay, unless you
America.
were there on some special secret vacation or a spy journey mission. When you got there, was it overwhelming? I mean, was it culture shock? Was you not only have to worry about a 135-mile race, but how do you process just adapting to the culture, food, and getting used to the idea of running an ultra marathon, depending on aid stations that
Well,
you might not know what they're going to have at the aid stations and
well,
stuff like that.
that's I mean the crazy thing about this race, like there is the race in some ways, the race director Mario, he does a great job, and then there are multiple there. Well, last year there were two U.S. liaisons, two U.S. people who live in the U.S. who had done the race a few times and were super helpful. They really do everything they can to make it as easy as possible, but as easy as possible is still a far stretch from seamless because
Yeah.
and not that there's anything their fault, but I mean, I knew they told me where to rent, who to rent the car from, what kind of car to get. They told me, I had my hotels booked at the start and at the finish. I had all of those details. There's actually no aid stations, but I'll get back to that in a second. It's sort of like Badwater in that sense.
Really? No, I
Yeah.
didn't know that. No aid stations.
Well, but the crazy thing, the interesting thing about Brazil, and actually I should preface all of this by saying that Brazil 135, the race that last year was the 10th anniversary, and that race, there's still a Brazil race going on next January, but the Brazil 135 that had gone on for 10 years is no more. There was as we saw with Badwater, there was some politics, and I guess
Interesting.
the story I've heard is the mayor at the finish line city decided that they could no longer finish the race there. And so Mario, the race director, instead of stopping the race or doing something different, he just extended it by 40 miles. Now it's a Brazil 135. This January, it's going to be Brazil 135 plus 175 miles with a 72-hour cutoff or something like that.
Oh my
70,
God.
38, 68. Yeah, I think 72-hour cutoff. So, but there's no aid stations, but what there are, you go through. So you're self-supported. Self-supported with a crew. I had a crew, and that follows along the whole way. And then you go through every like 15 to 20 or 25 kilometers probably. So every like 15, 20 miles, I think, you go through a small town. And at least during the day, those small towns were open with shops, restaurants,
Got
bathroom
it.
facilities if you needed it. So it,
Specifically
you know,
for race competitors,
well,
or
no. I mean, just because that's in the town.
got it. Okay,
So
so you
and
could
then
you
it's
could stop in like a 7-Eleven and use their facilities because yeah,
exactly
got it.
because it was just but in the middle of the night, obviously those cities mostly closed down, but there were still there were checkpoints throughout the race. I think like 10 or 12 checkpoints in these towns. So when you went through, so and at some of those there were medical personnel. So in an emergency, there was somebody there that could help, but for the most part, you're sort of on your own. Similar to Badwater, where it's you rely on your crew to help you out. Um,
Got it. And in this case, your crew was your brother
my
and
brother and a random, well, yeah, I mean, a fairly random Brazilian guy who had volunteered. We were supposed to have until like a week before. One of the U.S. liaisons had set me up with a friend of his who lives in Utah. She's a U.S. citizen, but she's Brazilian, maybe dual citizen, I don't know. And she was going to be down there visiting her family at that exact time, anyways. And she's like a former Utah Secret Service agent and not a runner, but like athletic. And so I was psyched because I mean, not only could she drive and crew and speak Portuguese, I assumed that she would also protect me if anybody tried to mug me. But at the very last minute, like a week before the race, she had her visa application got not rejected, I guess delayed somehow. Her return visa or one of her passport, something got so like a week before the race. In addition to all this other stress I was having, all of a sudden it's like, okay, Caroline, I can't come. And so we got hooked up with this random dude who, like a young guy who was able to help translate. He didn't drive and he couldn't run, but he at least helped translate, help my brother organize stuff, which was huge.
Well, that's cool. It's almost you hear those kind of stories a lot actually at ultras where you might be short a crew member, you might be short a pacer, but there's always a surplus of people there who are more than willing to jump in and help. in any sort of scenario or in any case. In this case, it seems like you had a local actually helping you on your
Yeah.
crew, which you can't really beat.
No, it worked out great. Natan was, I mean, he was a huge help. Just the translating alone helped my brother navigate and get around. So we couldn't have done it without him, I don't think.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So for those, spoiler alert, for those who might not already know, Josh finished. He did it. He finished the Brazil 135. And if you
Yay!
did not see it, he is an internet celebrity. BuzzFeed did a whole video on him. We talked briefly about it on that episode that we had you on, Josh. But for those who don't know what BuzzFeed is, for those of you international, BuzzFeed is I believe it is a global website, but they basically they're more known for making listicles or lists of top 10 crazy things you can say to your grandmother, or weird photo lists, or the best pants to wear in 1986, like weird lists. But they're famous for that and famous for celebrity gossip. But what's crazy is that they made a really great film about Josh running the Brazil 135, and I don't know how many views it has now. Millions of views, Josh.
Yeah, it was at like 2.7 last time I checked, which was a while ago. I don't check every minute like I used to do.
So now, you knew going down that you were going to film because you brought your GoPro with you. You didn't know how you were going to edit the footage together because you were doing it for a friend, right? A friend of yours works at BuzzFeed?
Yeah, a friend of mine is pretty senior at BuzzFeed, and I contacted him before the race just to, I mean, I knew between you and Billy, I'd seen a lot of people carry cameras at races, and I was like, this may be, probably could be a once in a lifetime experience going down to Brazil to do this race. I didn't own a GoPro, but I figured my buddy did because that's sort of what he does, and so I contacted him, asked if I could borrow one, and he ended up hooking me up actually with BuzzFeed with the GoPro they had and some batteries and equipment, and then. And they told me, and a head harness, and they were like, just video and take, what's it called, freeze frame? No, stop motion. I don't know, where it takes a picture every time lapse. See what you come up with, and then bring it back. And they did all the editing. I mean, I handed them, a bunch of memory cards, some footage from the iPhone, and they just ran with it. I had nothing to do with it after that.
I mean, I have to give them credit for doing an incredible job. The film is excellent. It's really well done, and it gives you a great glimpse into not only the life of an ultra runner during an ultra, but into Josh and his experience in Brazil and running an ultra in a foreign country for 135 miles, and the blisters that come along with it. So I don't have the exact link. I will post it again in the description of this video, of this Ginger Runner Live. I think you guys should all go watch it. It's fantastic.
Thanks,
but
Steve. Thank you.
Watching that and seeing Josh go through that, it just blows my mind. One, everyone who runs a 100-mile race blows my mind. Pine to Palm was this weekend. Run Rabbit Run was this weekend. Like, many 100-mile races have happened over the last couple weeks, big ones. And anytime I have a friend that's running them or finishing one, it's like, I can't even fathom you running that distance. And Josh, I can't even fathom running 35 miles more than that distance, because I've seen people wrecked after a 100-mile race. You see how wrecked they are. What is different? I mean, is there anything physically that changes over those last 35 miles, or is it really 100% a mental thing, which, in my opinion, is based off of seeing people's experiences with 100 miles, it is a huge mental burden and hurdle to get over. That extra 35 miles, how's it different?
I think I agree. I think it's totally mental. I mean, for me, and I'm sure this happens to you, I'm sure this happens to everybody who does any type of endurance sport, endurance, like long endurance sports, or even whatever. Like, there's a point at the beginning where you're like, okay, I'm 1 mile in, okay, I'm a mile and a half in, you're watching that. Or when I'm swimming in the pool, it's like, okay, now I've swam 200 meters and my goal might be 2,000. And so you're counting each lap or you're counting each mile early on. And then what happens, and it happens in my hundreds. Okay.
I can't swim. So thank you. Thank you for
Really?
rubbing that in my face.
I thought that you...
Don't you know we're not allowed to talk about swimming on the show because it gives me panic attacks? Josh.
I had no idea. Okay. Well, we'll get back to running then.
I'm kidding.
Um, so I mean, like that happened at both those races, where at the beginning of the race, and it happened in my hundreds too, or even in shorter stuff, or even in training runs, where you're looking at the watch pretty regularly at the beginning, and you're checking your pace, and you're watching the miles tick by. But then there's that point where it all just sort of, where all of a sudden, look at your watch, and it's been 10 miles, or it's been 45 minutes, or whatever it's been, as opposed to you were looking every 10 minutes. And so that there's some point in each of the 135s that I did, and I think in the hundreds too. I mean, where time just sort of doesn't it I don't know how to describe it, but it doesn't feel as concentrated as it does early in the race or at the end of the race too. And so, I mean, I think that if you can get to that point, then you then the distance to some degree doesn't matter. It's just getting that point. I don't know. This seems like a silly, I'm talking myself in circles. Because of course, when you're having like the low moments, like everybody has, and like I had in those races, every step counts. But I think that there's a point. I guess my point is that there's a point in those races where you're not so worried about every step. You're not so worried about every mile. It just
Got
sort
it.
of happens, and you let the race happen. And hopefully there's more of that than of the counting every step.
There's a really good question in the chat room. Really good. What happens when you gotta take a dump?
You
Josh, what
know,
happens when you gotta take a dump?
you just go. No, like in Brazil, one time I don't want to get, yeah, I'm gonna get graphic. They asked. It's their
Come on,
fault.
it's Gingerbread Life. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's their
No,
fault.
like so, I mean, like in like I said, in Brazil, you go through all these towns, and so like there were bathrooms. I think that one time, like a third away of the way into the race, there was a restaurant that was sort of the host restaurant in that town, and so their bathroom was open. So I used that bathroom, and then later there was this gas station that was fucking, excuse that, totally disgusting, but I used that. The final time, like this was the second sun. It was like probably 8 a.m. on the second day, and I just grabbed onto it. Like I hid behind a bush and grabbed onto a tree, and that was it. Um, at Badwater, you carry biffy. The new one of the new rules is you have to carry these biffy sacks, which tie around
Okay.
your waist and hang down below your butt, and you poop in the bag and then tie it up. But they also have like porta potties and bathrooms and stuff. A little bit more organized at Badwater than at Brazil, I guess.
Yeah, and actually, that's a now's a good chance to kind of move on into the next 135-mile race that you ran this year. So when you did Brazil, you finished Brazil. I'm assuming, had to take time to recoup. You can't just go right back into training. How much time did you take off from Brazil? And when did you find out you got into Badwater? And when did training start for that?
It's either good or bad, but the Badwater applications traditionally, I'm not sure what's happening this year, but Badwater applications traditionally open up immediately after Brazil, like the following week. Brazil, the Badwater, the qualification standards have been, again, sometimes it changes all the time. Um, it it is, or as of this year, it was 3 100s or previous Badwater completion or Brazil 135 or Arrowhead 135. So he makes it so that if, like, for me, I had 4 135, so I had enough 135s to meet the minimum standards. But he makes it so that if you don't have those, but you do Brazil, the following, that week you can apply for Badwater. So
Got it.
I applied. I mean, I went into Brazil convinced that if I finished and if I didn't totally hate it, as soon as I got home, I was going to start working on my Badwater application, and that's what I
Awesome.
did. I probably took a few weeks off. I remember, I mean, I couldn't walk for a few days with those blisters, and then I took a few weeks off, and I eased back into it. I think my training really started. I don't know. I would guess somewhere around March or April. So like,
A number of months then.
yeah. Well, actually, my wife and I, Elizabeth and I, took a trip to Asia. In I was running in Asia. That was beginning of March. So I probably took a month of like really easy training and then started picking it up again after about a month or 5 weeks, would be my guess.
Got it. So when you put in your application for Badwater, you know that Badwater is a totally different animal in the sense that you start at the lowest elevation, you go to one of the highest points of elevation. You also are dealing with 110 plus temperatures during the daytime and crazy cold temperatures at night. I mean, these fluctuations are incredible. You're dealing with really exposed sun the entire way, hot roads. You need a crew to follow you the whole way. You know all the logistics of Badwater. So why the fuck did you sign up for Badwater? Why that race?
It's crazy, but the first time I crewed at Badwater was in 2010. No, 2009 was the first time I crewed at Badwater. A friend of mine from the East Coast was coming out to do it his second time, and he knew that I was like a budding ultra runner, and I was local. The rest of his crew, he was flying out from the East Coast. So he asked me to crew him. I went out there and crewed him and had just the most amazing experience I've ever had doing anything related to endurance sports. Period. It's the crew at that time. You were allowed 6 people on a crew, so we had 6 people, and my runner was awesome. And there's just this great camaraderie that you build up. Just like, I mean, I had done it before, but just like crewing any other race, but like crewing, like we had crewing Billy at AC, but it's at a sort of at a high, it feels like it's at a little bit of a higher level because there aren't aid stations, because you're isolated, and because it's pretty badass to watch, just like in 100 though, but it's so badass to watch that runner and watch the other people you've been around while you were crewing cross that finish line. So the moment I finished that race, or during that race even, I decided that, anything I could do to make it happen, I was going to race Badwater at some point. Awesome. And so I mean, I knew that from a long time. I knew that it was going to, and then I crewed it 2 other times since then, and both times, my runner, it was a great experience. All 3 of the times my runners had those crazy lows, had the great highs, and finished. So it was sort of like one of those no-brainers. It was like, I have to do this, even though I know it might suck, even though it's going to be. I was also confident that I could finish. I didn't know how I would do, but I really wanted the experience, no matter what.
And with this race, the course changed. There's a lot of politics behind this year's race. Did you at any point feel, I don't know, maybe a little bit let down that it wasn't the original course that had stayed for decades, the original Badwater 135? This was a new course because of some governmental politics and stuff like that. They had to change it. Did that change your desire to run it any, or were you still absolutely animate about running the Badwater 135?
No, I'll admit there was. So it was right around the time, I think that I don't remember when the announcement came out that, I mean, I'd assumed all along. So I got into Brazil in like September, October. I was training my ass off for Brazil, thinking, okay, when I get home from Brazil, I'll apply for Badwater. And then it must have been like December when the national park made that decision that there was going to be no events, no athletic events in the park for 2014. That meant Badwater, as it existed, couldn't happen. And then it was sometime around the time that I was down in Brazil that he announced the new course, and of course I was disappointed. I mean, like I said, I'd been thinking about this race for 5 years. I knew I wanted to do, as much as I wanted to do a 135-mile race and finish to Mount Whitney, I wanted to do Badwater. I wanted to do the original course. I wanted to start at the Badwater Basin and finish at Mount Whitney, do the lowest to highest. So when I was in Brazil, I talked to a bunch of the people that I met in Brazil were Badwater vets, and it was definitely a topic of conversation, especially once the race had finished. And some people were, including people I'd crew down there that had done Badwater, and some people were sort of it's not the real race, it's not really Badwater, maybe you don't want to do it. But as I thought about it, as I talked to people, my decision was, I want to do 135 miles. I want to do 135 miles on pavement. It's my chance, whether or not it's Badwater, whether or not it's the same Badwater that I want to do, it's still a badass race. And it's the hand I've been dealt.
Very tough. It's still very tough, too. It's not like it got any easier.
No, hell no. I mean, it's question. I don't, it's hard for me to say, but some people, there were opinions both ways this year about whether or not it's harder, or the new course is harder or easier.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean,
that's
because
interesting.
it traded, our high was probably 105, 110 instead of the 120, 125. So that's a huge difference.
That was just
But
this year, right? Or did that actually have to do with location, like where the race was not
no,
going?
no, that was just this year. Exactly.
Okay,
Because the hottest part of the original course is in Death Valley, in
okay,
Death Valley National Park.
got it.
So that's where it gets into like the 120s. We didn't go into the park, so our high, still being in Lone Pine and in the area around there, um, still we got the 110. The difference though is that what he did to make it, I mean, I assume because he's limited on the roads he can use and stuff, but also to make it a big challenge is he added something like 8,000 feet of climbing to the race. So instead of being like, I don't know if it was 12 or 13, and now it was 21 or 22 or 24 or whatever it was, he added a significant amount of big climbs to make it so you traded some heat for climbs.
That's, I mean, that is just one of the challenges. So when it comes to training for this particular race, I know based off of our experience training, this was during a whole period where a lot of us SoCal guys were training together because we all had various races that
Right.
were either on trails around our area or we found excuses to train with each other. However, you spent a majority of your big training days alone doing your own thing. And I have to give you major credit for this because it takes a certain level of knowledge knowing that you are training for a very specific race and therefore training to that specificity. So days that we would go up into the mountains and to the San Gabriel Mountains and run in those hills and on those trails, you were adamant about not doing the trails, but actually running the roads up to the mountains alone in the heat. I remember passing you in my car one morning going, what the fuck is Josh doing running on Highway 2 alone? So with that training in mind, over the course of the heavy duty training weeks for you leading up to Badwater 135, how did you train for the heat? Because you didn't know that it was going to be 105 degrees. You didn't know if it was going to be 120 degrees. You still
Right.
had to train for the
Yeah.
heat. So how did you train for the heat, the elevation, the hills, and being on roads for 135 miles? Because that is way different than being on trails for 135 miles. What was your kind of regimen? You don't have to get into specifics of like weekly totals and stuff like that.
Right.
People are going to be really curious. I'm curious about this because you weren't with us. You were training on your own. I'm like, what are the numbers? What were you doing?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I knew that for most of the last 4 or 5 years, I've spent all my, not all, but most of my long runs and on the trails. I really love the trails, but I knew that for this, one of the keys was going to be getting used to the pounding of the pavement, getting used to my road shoes, getting used to the heat coming off the pavement, getting used to the harder surfaces, and the climbing is different too. I mean, like the climbing on the climbing on the roads I was running on which is similar to the race, was much more long, steady grades rather than like the most of our other runs in San Gabriel's where it's all of a sudden you're just like, okay, vertical and then down and then vertical and then down. This was, I mean, like the two was great because it's just a long, steady. You can climb for as long as you want at like I don't even know what percentage, but at a decent percentage. And so I knew that had to be part of my race plan as well. I still did. So I mean, what I did this time, usually, or in the past when I've been training for a trail race, I would do both of my long runs on the weekend on trails, and then
Okay.
and then during the week, about half of my training was on trail, half on roads, just because it's easier to run on roads right
Yeah.
out my door. This time, I still did twice a week. Usually, I was on the trails during the week for like medium to medium longish runs. And then all the rest of my runs were on pavement, either around home or Hollywood Hills, or I'd go out to the two, or wherever, in Malibu, wherever I could find decent hills with, sustained climbing and just long roads that weren't, in general, I tried to stay, a little safer by avoiding heavy traffic, although that's not
Yeah.
always.
Just long sections where you could just run and not worry about lights and stop signs.
Exactly, exactly. So I mean, and it worked. It was great. It I certainly missed the trails. There's no question about that. But running on the road, some people poo-poo it, and I remember there was somebody who made a comment one time on my Facebook page or something like, it sucks running on roads. I would never run on roads again. I love the trails. Roads are boring or whatever. And I got to this place where roads became sort of interesting in different ways. I mean, you got like, I would mentally interact with the scenery and like sort of play games with the cars that were passing me, and I mean, not play games with them, but like mentally play games with them, and like
you didn't run into the middle of the street and play chicken with random cars.
I carried marbles and threw them at their back window. No, but I mean, so I like listen. I missed the trails, but I made the best of it, and I came to really enjoy those long solitary road runs.
Yeah, I mean, following you on Strava too, you were able to see that you were running some interesting loops. I mean, you weren't just doing the regular same out and backs and all the boring roads that most people run for training regardless. You, being in the middle of Hollywood, you literally could just kind of run around the hills of Hollywood. I mean, you, rather than driving somewhere and then running up to a hill, you would just run there. So I mean, you were creating some pretty interesting loops. So I was commending you on that too. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I found, it was another thing where when I do, because usually my road runs around home are like those 4 to 6 to 8 mile runs, and then
right.
And I just run around the city. But in order to go longer and to get more hills, discovering the Hollywood Hills and and Beverly Hills was awesome, because there's like canyon after. If you don't live in LA, this might sound a little bit, I'm not going to describe this very well, but there's just canyon after canyon after canyon where it's like, okay, you can go up, it's a 5-mile climb that goes up 2,000 feet or 1,800 feet or whatever, get up to Mulholland Drive, then you can cross over and go down the next canyon and go over the other one, or you can go over the other side into the valley. And there's just tons of interesting different routes to explore, and I feel like I took advantage of that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I want to talk specifically about the race and how you dealt with nutrition, hydration, dealing with the heat and stuff like that. One of your crew members, Billy Yang, also been on the show a number of times, a fantastic filmmaker, has been making films with some local SoCal runners now for a long time. He was following you throughout the training process, kind of documenting you leading up to the race, and he was actually filming the race as well. Am I correct? He was there filming the race too? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
He's creating a cool series. 2 videos have already been released, and they are in partnership with Tailwind Nutrition. I actually am going to show you a clip of one of them right now. And he is currently working on, I believe it's the final installment, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the third and final installment, which will encompass the race. And that'll be dropping hopefully soon. But Billy Yang is fantastic, and I just want to show you guys a clip from his second episode, which is available now to view over at youtube.com/tailwindnutrition. So we'll take a look at that. But before we get to it, I still have buffs. I have a couple buffs here that I'm going to be giving away over the next couple weeks before the new shipment comes. So for those of you who are watching live, you're all eligible. You can win one of these buffs. We'll be giving one away. And Josh, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure.
I'll give you a couple minutes to think about it, but come up with a question and an answer that people who are watching the show live could potentially answer. I don't want to say relatively easily. I mean, make them go search on the web or something like that. But I'll give you a couple minutes because we'll watch the video. You can think of it during then. But come up with a good question that you can ask our live viewers that they might be able to answer to win a free buff. And when you figure out the answer, Josh, can you email me so I also know the answer? So first person to answer correctly in the chat room, we'll both keep our eye on it, will win.
So just, it's something that they have to search, not something that we've talked about, not like something they've heard, something that they can go search for online. Is that what you want?
Yeah, I mean, it could be something that we talked about. It could be something that they have to go search.
Okay.
The last thing I would want for the question to be is, what's Josh's last name? Because everyone knows it's Badass Spector.
Hell yeah.
I'd much rather be a question that will take a little bit of time for them to guess the answer to. But when you do come up with a question and answer, Josh, just email me or text me the answer so I have it. So you don't have to speak it because they can hear your voice when you speak.
Yes. Oh, wow. Really?
So we're going to take a little break and watch this clip from Billy's second film in the series, documenting Josh's rise to the Badwater 135. Here we go.
When it comes to my training, there's a quote by Bobby Knight that I like to keep at the front of my mind. The will to succeed is important, but what's more important is the will to prepare. Lone Pine is a quaint little town at the base of the Sierra Mountains. It's the portal of Mount Whitney and in general just people who love the outdoors. Everywhere you walk in Lone Pine, you can't help but stare up at the Sierras that just blanket one side of the town. It's spectacular looking up at those mountains, and it's a little bit humbling standing that far below them looking up. The town has lots of character. There's great little shops and restaurants, and all the locals are super friendly. Walking around in town, time seems to slow down a little bit. This year's Badwater course is pretty different from the traditional course that I've seen in the past. So it was really important to me to get out to Lone Pine before the race in order to do a training weekend with some of my crew. It's always beneficial to get familiar with the race course before you actually have to race on it. And in this race, because crew is so important, they're going to be with me pretty much the entire race. I wanted them to come out and see it as well, so that we would all know what exactly we were going to be facing during the race. It's the Cerro Gordo climb. Goes up to this abandoned mining town. It's tough. Pretty killer, especially right now because it's hot. It's Ben Jones, Badwater Ben. He's been crewing us all day, volunteered to come out. Badwater Ben was an invaluable resource, and I know that my crew and I learned a ton from him during the time we got to spend with him. And we're really grateful that he crewed us while we ran a chunk of the race course. He had tons of interesting stories about Lone Pine, about his life, about Badwater race, and we're really grateful that he took time out of his schedule to spend it with us and to show us around.
Yeah. If you guys want to watch the full film, go to, I'm just going to basically tease you with that. If you guys want to watch the full film, go to youtube.com/tailwindnutrition. I believe that is the URL for their YouTube channel. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it is on their YouTube channel. Billy Yang did incredible work on this series. It's just beautiful. I cannot wait to see the final installment, number 3, which I believe will also be uploaded there. But follow Billy Yang Films. If you go to facebook.com/BillyYangFilms, you'll see the teaser for Western Time, which is his film about Sally McRae at Western States, and then also you'll know when the 3rd installment of this drops. So Josh, let's talk about the race, because that clip is a great kind of lead up to you running Badwater. When you get there and you are about to toe the line to one of the most difficult foot races in the world, in some of the most extreme heat and temperatures, in one of the most inhospitable parts of the globe, what's going through your mind? Are you freaking out? Are you confident? Do you worry about, did you train enough? Nutrition? Tell me, what was going through your head?
You know, it was unlike Brazil, where, and I didn't really get into this so much, but in Brazil I went down and I was scared of the distance, but I was way more scared of the logistics. Like we got down there and I was terrified about, like, is my crew gonna get lost? I don't know what the course is like. Is it gonna pour rain? Do I have the right clothes? Do I have the right shoes? All of those things were killing me during Brazil. I mean, like, the day before Brazil, I was freaking out. I was like legitimately like not panic attack, but pretty close, I think, just because I was so nervous about all the logistics. I wasn't even focused on the distance. I wasn't focused on racing. I was focused on just like all the other stuff. So
Yeah.
totally different from that is when I got to Badwater, as you saw in that video, Billy and Colin and I went out and we scoped out the course, and I'd seen the last 45 miles. The last 45 miles of the race is the same as the traditional Badwater course, so I crewed that 3 times, including and paced a bunch of that. So going to Badwater, I sort of knew what the weather was going to be like, and it was going to be hot. I didn't figured it wouldn't rain, might get a little cold at night, but and also I had everything I needed here in LA. I mean, it was easy to just pack up the van and go. So that stuff was totally not that stuff really wasn't on my mind. But what anxiety was is while and now that I had done it once, I was treating Badwater as sort of more of a race. Like I knew that I wasn't, I knew enough of the people up front that I knew it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to podium, I'm going to win. Like that wasn't even like a glimmer of my eye. But this was a time where I was like, okay, well, I'm going to see how hard I can push, and if I can do this in X time. So it was. I was anxious about my performance than about the other stuff, which I guess that's how it should be. Just because I knew, even though my brother did a fantastic job at Brazil and kicked ass and did incredible, I knew this time I'd 4 of them plus my wife at home base in Lone Pine, and having I had four great crew members, and so I didn't really think that was stuff I needed to worry about too much.
Yeah.
And so I was nervous about. I guess short answer is I was nervous about performing in the performance of the race rather than all the other stuff.
That's good. I mean, it's better to be nervous about that than, I guess, being freaked out about the fact that, can I even run that distance? I mean, you've already proved to yourself that you could, so it wasn't so much about the distance, it just was other sort of logistical things. But yeah, the fact that you were able to go into the race wanting to race it almost that's good. That seems like a really good mentality to go win with. So let's talk specifics. Gear. What shoes did you rock? Nutrition. What did you work on with nutrition? What worked for you? What didn't work for you? I know the answer, but those who are viewing might not know the answer. Clothing. Did you have to change often? Like, these are all specifics about this race that I'm not necessarily knowledgeable about, and maybe some viewers want to know that as well. So help us out.
Yeah. Nutrition is an easy one. As probably evidenced by, well, I don't know if it's evidenced by, but the fact that Tailwind is supporting those videos. I mean, I approached Tailwind separately from Billy approaching Tailwind about doing a video series, because I've been using Tailwind. I started using Tailwind summer of 2013, and I love the stuff. I don't want to make this into a commercial, which sometimes my blog sort of becomes when I talk about Tailwind, but I love the stuff. I think it's really one of the best products on the market, or if not the best product on the market for that kind of stuff. It totally hooks. The first time I'd used it in a really long race and relied on it was in Brazil, and again in Badwater. Probably some really large percentage of my calories at Badwater came from Tailwind. I supplemented with some real food, but that's all I'm going to say. I mean, you can read my blog if you want all the details. You can email me, but sorry, not you, Ethan. Anybody who's curious, because I really love this stuff. I think it works great. In addition to Tailwind, I ate some like avocados. I had some soup at night, some chips here and there. But really, that was my nutrition. For shoes, somebody asked this on the messages, and I responded briefly. But for me, I've been running in Skechers, the Go Run, for a few years, and at first, and even now, I sort of, I mean, I guess Meb helps with this a little bit, but and Kara, but I've been withstanding the laughs and the smirks but I really think Skechers makes a good shoe. It's lightweight, it's flexible. It fits my
It's super
foot really
affordable
well.
too. It's
It's
super
super
cheap.
affordable. The two problems I have with it are is it's a little bit, and I've said this publicly. Skechers doesn't sponsor me. Like I don't owe them anything. They don't owe me anything. Whatever. But it's it's a cheap shoe, but it also falls apart. Not falls apart. It wears out really quickly. So I
Right.
think it probably balances out in terms of like $100 shoe versus this $80 shoe that you can always get the discount on. Um, and also, it's not. If I were to do Badwater again, I probably wouldn't do it in the Go Run. I think it's not enough shoe. It doesn't have it for that long. For my like 30-mile training runs, it was fine. For longer than that, it just doesn't. It's just not enough shoe. So the other shoe I wore was the Hoka, the Bondi B, which I'd planned on wearing, but hadn't planned on wearing that as much of the race as I had. I was planning on more Skechers, less Hoka, but in the end, it ended up being more Hoka, less
Yeah.
Skechers.
Okay.
And you'll see, or if you like, I was digging into this a little bit and looking around after the race and during the race, like so many people. I don't know what people wore at Badwater before there were Hokas because, I know they were wearing all kinds of shoes, but so many people at Badwater, like I would guess 2/3 of the field wore Hokas at some point during the race.
Wow.
Yeah, it's insane. Like, and it makes sense because you're insulated from the heat of the pavement and
Hmm.
the extra cushioning in a race